Today, it's part two of our amazing worldwide exclusive one-on-one with Bret the Hitman Hart. Today, he'll talk to us about some of his not-so-favored people, like Shawn Michaels, like Triple H. And what does he think about what Hulk Hogan had to say about him on this show? Today, one-on-one with Bret Hart. Bring it on.
Off the Record with Michael Landsberg is brought to you by the Keg Steakhouse and Bar. For great steaks, good friends, see you tonight.
We are back with Bret Hart. It's part two of our world exclusive with one of Canada's best-loved athletes. I argued with Vince McMahon on this show. I said he's a Canadian icon. Vince said he's not. I think I have been proven correct, given the warmth and the love the Canadians have shown for you. And you have sat on this set in the first show, and you showed us all that you are so incredibly far back from your stroke. Thanks so much for joining us. And you know what? It's just great to see you looking so good.
My pleasure.
Okay, let's talk some wrestling now. Let's talk about wrestlers. Let's talk about Hulk Hogan. He was on this show a short time ago, and he had some nice things to say about you, but he also pointed to the fact that maybe there had been some tension, at least from his perspective. Take a look at this clip, then I want you to comment, Bret Hart. Here's what Hulk had to say on OTR.
I love Bret Hart. I love the Hart family. I feel horrible about the tragedy and the problems over the last decade with the Hart family. And I just had a very crazy letter come to my house from Bret Hart's manager or agent. And when my book came out, the gist of the letter was, how could you trash Bret Hart at a time like this? And they actually sent an article where Bret had written this unbelievably beautiful article. I don't know when it was, but it said, if there's anything true or real in professional wrestling, it's Terry Bollea. I've seen him with the kids. And the article was unbelievable. And I felt bad to see the article and the guy thinking I was trashing Bret. And this was Bret Hart's manager. And I explained to my wife, I said, I don't understand the letter. I mean, in the book, I just told what happened.
So, comments?
Well, he's wrong. You know, Hulk,
Nice to know nothing changes. You lay it on the line.
I certainly don't want to open up a big thing with him again, because I did trash him a lot years ago when and he didn't pass the torch to me, and he can go ahead and say it was a misunderstanding with Hulk.
That was the Yokozuna thing, right?
Yeah, and he says that, like, what happened was, I was supposed to wrestle Hogan at SummerSlam for the belt, and we even took pictures, which is maybe he doesn't remember this, or Vince, but I remember we took pictures with a tug-of-war with the belt for the poster, so we know it was a title match. And so over the weeks, Vince tells me that Hulk isn't gonna wrestle me because he doesn't want to drop the belt to me. And so I confronted Hulk on it, and we had a big blow-off about it. And then we go and confront Vince, and Vince goes, it's a non-title match. And I'm going, since when, you know? Because I knew that it was said to be a title match. And so then after I kind of got over that, and of course Yoko got the belt. And people, it's not so much the belt. People don't understand, it's not the belt. The belt in those days was not contracts and stuff. The champion is the highest paid guy in the company. And when the boss of the company says you're getting the belt, it means I've earned the spot to become the highest paid guy in the company. And Hulk Hogan takes it upon himself to redirect my fate and say, no, you're not getting it. He's going to get the main event money, and you're still in the middle of the card or wherever. And I certainly think I worked hard enough to earn that spot. And I think it would have been a great historical match. So I did kind of knock him for years about being a bad actor. I don't know if I said anything wasn't true, but when I got to WCW, I sort of saw things a little differently, because I felt that Vince tried to railroad Hulk a little bit in the end, maybe even using me to do it. And I thought, I feel like I was wearing his shoes a little bit.
So were you guys able to work together in WCW?
Yeah, we buried the hatchet, and I shook his hand, and I never said a bad thing about him or wrote a bad thing about him again. And I wrote a really nice column about him, and then he wrote in his book that he doesn't know what my problem is, and I always bash him everywhere. Hence today. You know,
what was the politicking like in WCW? Because I know a lot of people look at you when you came over there. You were making a lot of money, and there were people that actually suggested on this show that was a reason for tension. What was it like back then?
All I can say was like a lunatic asylum, and I think of Eric Bischoff, who I like as a person, I really do, and I sympathize maybe with whatever he was dealing with. But Eric Bischoff was a lot like that wizard in The Wizard of Oz, you know, with all the... But he really had no idea what he was doing. they never came up with one idea for me, and anytime I did come up with an idea, I was usually turned away, and it was the most screwed up place I ever worked for.
And you've worked up in some pretty screwed up places, right?
Yeah, it was I don't know who said, you know, when I think about how much I came, like Vince, you look at what Vince did after I knocked him out in Montreal. He took that whole storyline and built himself into the corrupt promoter and made you know, basically turned the fortune of the company around through that. And if
Does that piss you off, the fact that he was smart enough to take the tension that he had with you and the fact that you smacked him and the people hated him and turn it into a billion-dollar empire?
Nah, not so much. I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I always, you know, I kind of figured he'd do something like that. But I think what disappointed me and maybe does make me angry sometimes is how poorly the WCW used me. I mean, they couldn't have done a worse job. And you think, you know, the scary thing is what they were paying me. They paid me great up until they hurt me, and then you know, they just didn't know what to do. Vince McMahon said to me, he said, WCW will never know what to do with a Bret Hart. And I remember I even said that to him in Florida. I said, you're so right. They didn't have a clue what to do with me from the second I got. I think there was a lot of people that were stabbing me in the back behind closed doors.
Who was stabbing you in the back?
I'll never know. I've had people tell me that.
Think?
I have a lot of people say it was Hogan, but I don't necessarily know that.
Can you have friends in wrestling? Because at the very top where you were, it's all about passing the baton to someone else. It's all about worrying about who's going to come up behind you and take it from you. It must be so enormously difficult to have real friends who are similarly at the top with you.
Yeah, no, you can have lots of them. It's the guys with the right attitude and guys that respect. I think a lot of the real good workers, like the Hennings.
Like who? Like give me examples of guys, because I asked you who stabbed you in the back, but who's a guy that you can remain friends with, even if you got to pass the baton to him or he's got to give it to you, it's still friendship above and beyond?
Oh, lots of them. Like Benoit, Kurt Hennig, you know, even guys that aren't necessarily great workers, but guys with a good attitude and try hard. And, you know, I never had a problem about winning or losing in a wrestling match, contrary to what people might try to say today. But I mean, I never ever had a problem with that. As long as I understood that the guy that I was wrestling was willing to do the same thing for me, if it came down to it. Like, I wouldn't care about tossing a coin for a wrestling match. It was a bit of a brotherhood, and there was a lot of guys that worked for themselves.
Well, I want to ask you about a guy who may fall into that category. Shawn Michaels, back in 1997. He was the guy with Vince that you were most pissed off with, and we'll talk about Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and lots more when OTR returns with Bret the Hitman Hart.